Record.
Yep.
So hello everyone, welcome to this interview. Today I have joining me Kristina Preston, who is a recruiter that specialises in the charitable sector, and she works for a company called TPP. And I've invited her along to have this chat with me and with you guys because I know that so many of you have questions around your career change and what's going on in light of COVID, and also as a chance to get some extra tips that might help you on your career change journey. So I'll introduce Kristina in a moment, and I just want to remind you that so many of you have sent in your questions. So hopefully I will answer them all. Hopefully Kristina and I will do our best to get through them. And if at the end of this you have any further questions, you can post them in the comments or drop me an email to holly@evolving.careers, and we'll do our best to follow up. So let's get started. Hi Kristina.
Hey Holly.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. So for our audience that don't know you, tell us a little bit about your work as a recruiter and your company and what you do.
Sure. So I am a senior business manager at TPP Recruitment. We're a not-for-profit specialist, so we work with the typical charities, big, medium and small, as well as those that you don't quite realise are charities, so like your membership and awarding bodies, regulatory bodies, and also other institutes such as healthcare and education, such as universities. We've been going for over 20 years now. So I specialise in education roles, so very much around sort of the development, delivery and quality assurance of education, whether that's an education programme that runs in schools or the community via charities, or it might be the development and running of assessments and qualifications at a professional level. And basically my job is a 360 role. So I deal with both candidates and clients. So that's dealing with clients that already know us, that have jobs on, that they want us to help fill, or it might be new clients that we get on board because they have looking for roles and want to use our specialist services. On the candidate side of things, it's very much a proactive and reactive. So we have candidates that come in that are querying, and we try and help them find roles, or we might headhunt, although we hate using that phrase. It's more proactive searching for people that are in certain fields that don't realise that they're looking for a role until we come up with hopefully their dream one and put it in front of them and they like the look of it. And then we support the candidate journey, so very much helping with everything from CVs to applications to interviews, right through to the offer stage, where it's at that point we hand over to the client to deal with all the contracts, etc. But we'll still normally keep in touch, make sure people are happy, make sure the role is going well on both sides of things. So it's a very consultative approach that we take, very much kind of hand-holding and supporting as much or as little as somebody needs or wants during their job search or for that particular role that they happen to be applying for.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that introduction. You've covered pretty much everything I could have asked, which is amazing. Okay, so I thought what we could do is just start off with the COVID questions, if you like, because I think that's the burning things on everyone's mind. So how is it affecting the job market? What are you seeing? Is there more opportunity, less opportunity?
I think this very much depends on the sector that you're working in or want to work in. So I'm literally just going to cover these questions from our side as a not-for-profit recruiter, because obviously other sectors may have completely different feelings and kind of experiences at the moment. So in kind of the not-for-profit world, it really does vary even within us, because we cover so many as an agency, the different parts of a charity. So I do education, but I've got colleagues that deal with HR, others that deals with fundraising, others that deal with finance. So it does vary. I think at the moment, what we're generally seeing is the roles that are coming up are wanting a more specialist skill set. So very much led by the changing services that our clients and our organisations are finding. So they're having to offer their services in a much more digital way. So therefore, the roles that we are getting coming through have a very much of a digital focus, either enhancing current services, upping the workload, up the increase of workload, in their services in that area, or simply that they need to revamp and redo, and maybe digital projects that have been on the back burner, as that's something that we quite like to do, have now suddenly been, actually, we need to do this now, because if this continues, or we get stuck in a second wave, or something like this happens again, we're not going to be able to survive, or we can't, worry about not being in this position again in the future. So yeah, I would say on the general, there is a downturn in the roles, obviously, as most people have seen if they're keeping an eye out. But what you'll tend to see is a trend in the types of roles that are out there of a much more future-focused approach overall.
I mean, I can certainly echo that in terms of the employers that I work with. Many of them have put a stop on recruitment, particularly in universities. Many construction firms have cut their contractors. So just for those who aren't necessarily thinking about going into the charitable sector, but I have definitely seen that in some of the sectors that I know my clients are looking at moving into. So given that there's a lot fewer jobs potentially due to this, and people are particularly looking for those digital skills, that might be a good area for a career changer to highlight in terms of their transferable skills. But I'm wondering, is there going to be, is it a much more competitive market now? So one of the challenges that career changers always have is that they are going to be up against candidates who may have more specific experience or qualifications than them. And where they really, where I see them doing the best for themselves is when they're able to really make best use of their transferable skills that give them an edge over perhaps some of the candidates that have only been within a single industry in the past. So in terms of COVID and less jobs, do you think it's going to be a more competitive market right now? Are there people who've been made redundant that might potentially be thinking about taking a lower paid role or a lower position?
I think in this kind of climate, it is more competitive. I think a lot of people are panicking right now as well and applying for any job that comes along. What we're finding is that the roles that we do post, we get a lot of click here to appliers, which basically are people that haven't really read what the role is, have basically seen a job title and click apply. And I think you're right in terms of the transferable skills. I think it's really about taking the time and understanding that particular role that you're applying for, and not just showing your transferable skills, but showing why and how that is going to be a benefit to the organisation that you're applying for. I think that's what a lot of people forget to do on any application, whether it's during this climate or whether it's in a normal working climate, is that a lot of the feedback we get and a lot of the feedback that we give is that it's all very well putting on a CV or a cover letter that I've done this, I've done that, I've ticked this box, but what have you achieved? Like, how has that made a difference? How has that made what is the outcome of what you've done? And that's the real big thing that organisations want to see. They want to see is what you've done, but what was that? Because that then makes it relevant to them. They can see that in context. So even though competition might be more, maybe people are willing to take pay cuts, which they are. There might be, a lot of other things going on as well. What you'll still find is that the quality of those applications does then dwindle. So to really stand out from the masses, you need to make sure that you're showing that it isn't just any job you're applying for, that you've actually put the thought and the time into applying for this particular role. So even though you as an individual might be worrying, you might be applying for several different roles, what you don't want to do is make that obvious to the organisation or the employer. Take as much time over each application that you do and make sure that you are tailoring everything to them. Because even then, if it is a transferable skill, they can see why it's transferable and how that will benefit them as an organisation as well.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Certainly one of the biggest things when I work with people on their CVs is around not just what are you good at, but why are you great at it? What's unique about you that is of benefit to this specific role or company? It's the big difference between someone, I think, reading the CV and going, okay, they seem like a great fit, to going, oh, well, they tick all the boxes, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, the whole application process, I always like to describe it as kind of that whole catch a fish to catch a bigger fish thing. So your CV is something that is normally the first thing an employer looks at. They normally won't look at a cover letter until they've scanned the CV, because it's the easiest thing to read. So you kind of want to go onto that yes pile as quickly as possible. So your CV should basically be this is why you should hire me. And basically, I tick all of your essential criteria on your person spec. And your cover letter should then give a bit more detail into that. So basically, how you've hit those points, how you've made a difference, and what the difference has been. And that will also give an idea. And you can also bring in, your knowledge on the company there. So why this role, why this organisation, choosing the examples to fit with the organisation's aims or that particular role's goals. And then your interview will be yet another step on that. So your interviews then when you can give yet more depth, yet more context, yet more examples. So it's all a chain. The first step is to get on the yes pile. And to do that, you need to be short, sharp, and to the point. This is why I tick your boxes. Your cover letter should then, whet their appetite in terms of, you need to see me because, I'm interesting and I can give you all of this. And then your interview is when you actually clarify all of their points and, you can give a solid representation of yourself as well.
Yeah, definitely. Great tips there. I think the other one that you mentioned just about CVs that I didn't pick up on straight away is this point about demonstrating the achievements of your past roles, not just what you've done. So one of the things that I see a lot of people do is they'll write, for example, a statement about almost what they see in their job specification. But actually, on a CV, you don't just want a list that looks like the job specification for what you've done. You want to see what someone has achieved, whether that's in figures or in more, in a more descriptive form.
Yeah. I mean, CVs, we have some key points that we always say. Number one, bullet points should be your best friend on a CV. I'm sure a lot of your clients and you yourself have hired before, and do you really have the time and energy to read through 20 paragraphs of, someone's role? What you want to see on a CV is you pick out that key information that you're looking for. So you want to scan read, and more often than not, are you really going to get to page 2 and the page 1.5, page 2, page 3 of a CV? You probably made your mind up normally by the end of page 1.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think all the research agrees with that. Some of them even say within 30 seconds.
Absolutely. So you need to make it as quick as possible. So a lot of the time we now advise people to actually take off your personal statement, because as much of a hardworking, dynamic, innovative individual with great organisation skills who can work well in a team as well as by yourself you think you are, guaranteed at least half of the other people that are applying against you have put exactly the same terminology, possibly in that order as well. So take off a cliched personal statement. The first thing that you should have after your name, telephone number, and email address should be like a section that says key skills and achievements. And what you want to do is have 5 bullet points that really match 5 of the key essential criteria in that person's spec with, as you say, some figures. So if point number 1 is experience of managing a team, your first point in there should be exceptional team manager, experience of managing a team of 20 with 5 direct reports. Point 2 might be generating income. You could say that you've generated over £500,000 in income through sales or through fundraising or through, corporate partnerships. And the other thing is start to use the language that the employer is using as well. If we're talking about transferable skills, demonstrate that you know the area to an extent, that field. So if it's a role if the job description is saying corporate partners, corporate sponsors, whatever it may be, start to use that term of language in your CV as well. In your current role, you might call them, I don't know, corporate clients or something along those lines. It's exactly the same thing, but just by turning the language to suit what they're saying in their job description and how they describe something can make a massive difference, because they will subconsciously, feel that you're on the same level as them in terms of what they're talking about and who they're wanting to aim at. They will think that you're knowing and feeling the same as well. And you do, you're just using different language at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. All great tips. I think as well, there are, particularly for career changes, there's often a tendency to use all the buzzwords in the the profile statement or in the objective statement. And for me, I do encourage people to put that statement in, but I encourage them to only make statements that are adding relevant extra information. So, 20 years experience, for example, might be a great thing to keep in that personal statement. Or I encourage people especially to talk about why they're great at what they've done in that, rather than all the buzzwords and all the things that everyone else is going to say. It's something that feels more human and natural in a way as well.
Absolutely. And taking ownership, I think, is a massive thing. I think we're very good at not wanting to take on the achievement of what we've done. So sort of saying, yeah, as a team, we achieved this. As part of an organisation, I managed to do that. But actually, they want to know what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
How have you led? How have you managed? How have you project managed? What have you been responsible for? And I think if you're going to do a personal statement, make sure that you are demonstrating where and how you have taken that responsibility and where you personally have made that difference. You may have managed the team that did it, and overall it was a team effort, and no one's denying that. But if you hadn't led that team, if you hadn't solved those issues, looked at things strategically, then would that goal have been achieved?
Mm-hmm. And I can certainly echo that. I've read a lot of CVs when I've been recruiting for my own teams in various corporate roles, where I've read a CV and thought, I have no idea what specifically this person did. They might say, I managed a team, I did this, I did that. But when I actually try to drill down in that CV level into what did you do, I think we have a huge aversion in British culture to talk about ourselves and to big ourselves up. So we all hate CVs, I think, as a general statement. I'm sure there's some people that love it, but for the vast majority, it's a bit of a challenge to have to say that and not feel that you're overselling yourself or being too big-headed.
Absolutely.
The CV is your advert. And I think two great points that you've said there is, one, keep it really clear and simple and focused. And two, don't go on about everything. I always say to people, it's an advert. So you just want to give people enough. You don't have to tell them everything that you've done. It's better if you can get to interview and have extra things to share, rather than put it all in the CV and then end up with overwhelming people going, oh, this person's too unclear about what they want and where they're headed.
Yeah. I mean, one tip that I say to some of my candidates, especially those that have had long careers or varied careers, or a role that maybe has covered kind of several different elements, is you could have a CV that's 300 pages long, but it never sees the light of day. And what you can do on that CV is put everything that you've ever done so you don't forget it, and have it just in the background on your desktop, and then you can just copy and paste the relevant points into the CV that you're applying for. It saves you having like umpteen different versions of your CV on file, applying for a role and trying to hunt through all of those CVs to find that one bullet point that you put and you can't remember what you said now that would be perfect for this one. And it's a really nice way. It's like, and then you can add to it role on role. So you don't have to keep doing your CV over and over every time you get promoted or change jobs or whatever it may be. You can literally have this CV that sits there your entire career, and you just add to it and add to it and add to it. And like I say, it could be 3,000 pages long, but it doesn't matter. No one's going to see it except for you, and you're just going to pull out the bits that are relevant for that particular job that you're applying for.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Have that master CV and then pull out the relevant elements when you apply for a specific role. And it echoes that point that you've said about how important it is actually to make sure you're applying for roles that you really want rather than just applying generically to try and get a job. It's one of the things that I think, particularly if someone's been made redundant or is making a career change, there's a tendency to have this panic, to want to really find a job fast and just take anything. But it can be quite detrimental to just take anything, because then you're going to get a set of experience that might take you in a direction you don't want to go, or you might end up in a role that's not suitable that could lead to further complications where you don't stay there for a long time, you don't have great experiences, you don't get the best review for, you know, if you ever need a reference and things like that. So you know, that's another point that I always share with my clients is absolutely, I know it feels counterintuitive to apply for less, but it is quality over quantity, I would say.
Absolutely. And especially at the moment when, you know, I know our inbox is full every day. We log in every morning and our application inbox probably has about 50 new applications that we have to go through for about, I would say, a handful of jobs that we have on at the moment. And if you're a hiring manager in a company where you're not really being paid to recruit, and you've got even less time to spend on it, your filter is going to be so low. Like, we have to filter, so we will scan to an extent, but they will be scanning even less. So the more that you can give them there from the get-go to make them want to read more is so important. So yeah, even though it's competitive, take your time is probably what I'm saying, because it will be worth it in the end.
Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people as well have been furloughed at the moment, and it's quite a unique experience. We've never had so many people in the country all furloughed at the same time. And with that, for many people comes the fear of, well, should I be looking for a job now, or should I wait until the worst happens? So one of the questions that I've had in is now a good time for me to look at jobs if I am furloughed? My answer to this is always yes, because I think it's always good to keep an eye on the market and know your options, right? But what's your view on that?
Exactly that. There is no bad time to be looking at new roles at the end of the day. I think that point is proven by the fact of, as I said at the beginning, a lot of the roles we have come in as specialists. A lot of the time we have to actively hunt for these people who are in roles and might not even realise themselves they're looking for a new role until we present this opportunity. And it works the other way round, that, you know, it doesn't stop you looking for a new role no matter what the climate is. Yes, it might take you a little bit longer to find it, but who knows, maybe that ideal role does come out now that the furlough is on. So I would say always be open, no matter what situation you're in, whether you think you're happy and content in a role, to whether you are looking now that furlough is on. It shouldn't make a difference in terms of looking at new roles and looking at new opportunities. Firstly, as we said, because the dream job might just come along right now. And also, it's a good idea just to see what the market's doing. I think especially for your guys that are looking at career changes, keep an eye on what's out there, because then you'll start to know the types of roles that are there and that you might be interested in. So you might be at a stage where you think, I'm debating a career change, but I don't really know what I could go into. Well, the only way that you're going to know what's out there and what you could go into is by keeping an eye out, and whether that is setting yourself up on some job alerts for, you know, various websites, whatever area you think you want to go into, looking at the different job titles there are in our sector, except if you work in like HR and finance. There is no specific job title. Like, I could have the same job on 5 times, each time with a different job title attached to it. So it's very much looking at what skills, what interests you as well, I think is a massive thing. Because if you're driven by a role that is something that you want to make a difference in, or that you have a particular interest in, those roles might not come up very often. So you've always got to keep an eye out for when they do.
Yeah, some really great points there. And I think people have a tendency to forget that point about what they're interested in, particularly in times when the labour market does have fewer jobs. I think I see what clients do is they start to try and squeeze themselves to fit into a particular job role, rather than look for the natural fit that actually is a real benefit, is really going to benefit from their strengths and their interests and their experience and their skills.
Absolutely. Like, we spend most of our adult life at work, 40 hours a week minimum. Well, so, you know, you've got to be interested in what you're doing. If you're not interested in what you're doing, you're going to fall out of love with it very, very quickly. And even though we're working from home, most of us these days, you know, and there is that work-life balance, and you think, oh, it's not too bad because I'm at home. But when you go back to the office, are you still going to feel that way? Or, you know, is it enough to keep you motivated? And I think that's a big thing, is actually being interested in what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Do what you love, in a way. And you know, if you can't do that, take a stepping stone to get closer to it, and ask yourself what you can do today to take you a step closer to that. You know, even though we're in COVID, I think there still are opportunities to volunteer and gain experience that might be relevant and help you gain a new position as a career changer. I know previously we've talked about that, Kristina. I wondered if you could just share maybe a little bit more about what those opportunities look like.
So in our sector, obviously volunteering is huge. You know, COVID at the moment, huge demand for volunteers, but it's not just about, I mean, it is about the giving back, don't get me wrong. Like, you know, it's always good to make a difference. And if you feel passionately about something, then volunteering is a really good way to be able to have an impact on that and to be involved in that. But using it in a more selfish way, I suppose, is using the skills that you develop in that area. So if you want to transfer into the charity sector, learning about how a charity works, how funding works, how the program management side of things work, because they could be very different to the sector that you're in at the moment. And a lot of the time people see volunteering as like shaking buckets or delivering food or medicine like it is at the moment, or a befriending service, or whatever it may be. But volunteering can come in all shapes and forms. So trusteeships, for instance, trusteeships are a massive need in the sector, and especially for your audience. A lot of charities now are looking to be more diverse. You know, they're actively looking to have a less white middle class war, trying to attract females, you know, BMAE people, disabled people, anything along those lines into their board is a huge priority for them. And at a trustee level, you can make a they're going to need a marketing expert. If they're looking at looking to improve diversity or process, maybe a HR expert. So there's so many skills that can directly transfer without needing that charity background, but by being a trustee, you'll learn that charity sector through knowing how, like I say, funding, programming, etc. operates. Other things that people forget about are like governors of school boards and things along those lines. So yeah, there is a huge variety of different volunteer.
I think we've lost Kristina there. Her internet seems to be dipping in and out right now. Hopefully she'll join us back in a moment or two. Oh, we lost you there, Kristina.
All right, you froze and I realised halfway through my little spiel, so I do apologise.
That's okay. So we got up to, you talked about trusteeships and also the opportunities in governance of schools as well. That's where we got to.
That was basically what I was saying, that there's look outside of your normal volunteer roles and think and look at kind of the more senior level volunteer roles as well. And they're open to all ages. I think a lot of people assume that I can't be a trustee, I'm not old enough. They're for retired people. Like, that's a lot of feedback that we get. And actually, no, that's not the case. Again, organisations are really looking to diversify their boards, their school governors, as I say. You know, they're looking for younger people to bring fresh ideas. And I think in this day and age, again, with the digital thing, people that have an understanding of technology maybe and how things can operate in a modern world is a real benefit. So yeah, when volunteering is an excellent way, and not just, as I say, to clock up the CSR points, but also as well to do it for your own time. And what you'll find as well is I think a lot of companies are behind that now as well. And I know a few people, even friends, that have got on to school governors boards or are doing trustee bits and pieces, or even just volunteering their time outside of work or whatever. And their companies are actually giving them time off to do it, because it's a great thing that them as a company can share about, that, yeah, we let our staff do this.
Yeah, I'd agree. I've certainly seen an increase in companies who are allowing their staff to do that. And I think for those that are out of work, it is I know it sounds counterintuitive, again, very often to take on a volunteering role when you're out of work. However, the benefits in terms of your mental health are brilliant, because you still feel valuable and useful. You're far less likely to be negatively affected by rejections when you don't get every single job that you apply for, which is, you know, most of us will get far more rejections in our life when applying for jobs than we ever will yeses, and that's completely normal. And it just brought me on to this other question, which is somebody's asked for mid-career professionals, so that's predominantly who come and do career changes with me. Are jobs more likely to be looking for digital skills now, which we've already covered? But the second half of the question is there more flexibility in terms of hours and jobs and roles as a result of COVID?
Oh, 100%. All the excuses companies have used in the past, like our systems wouldn't work, it's not secure enough, it's whatever it may be. We like doing meetings face to face, have all gone out the window. You know, the last 3 months, 4 months, what are we on now, has really shown that you can work from home. But I do think that it's all around as well, showing your flexibility to a company. So even though a company, you know, might advertise a role as office based, you can ask the question, like, you know, I want to do, is it possible for me to do this home based, either on a full time or maybe 1 or 2 days a week, but show that you're willing to be flexible as well. So turn around and say, look, I am more than happy to come into the office 2 days a week, 3 days a week, whatever you can do. Or if you're further afield, like, I'm happy to come down once a fortnight and spend 2 days in the office. I'll come down Tuesday night, I'll work Wednesday, Thursday in the office, and I'll go home on the Thursday evening. It is always going to be a compromise situation, unless a role, even actually no, when a role is expressly said as home based, you'll still find in that role you will be expected to go to that head office, even if it's once a month or, you know, once a quarter or something. So it is a compromise act, and it is, you know, not all going to be one way, and it's not always going to all be remote like it is now. But it's being willing to offer your flexibility as well as theirs, and also being honest and sort of saying as well that even if, say, you negotiate it to you're doing 3 days a week in the office and 2 from home, or vice versa, being flexible with your days. So say normally you do like a Monday, Wednesday and a Friday at home. If a meeting comes up on a Wednesday, don't being stuck in your ways of, well, I can't come, that's my work from home day. Being flexible to say, all right, yeah, I'll switch my work from home day this week, or I won't do 3 work from home days this week, I'll do 3 in the office days, because there's no way I can change the meetings I've already got penciled in on the Tuesday and the Thursday. And if you're willing to do that, then a company is more willing to be flexible with you as well. And I think as well, I always say to people in normal climates is that organisations are happy to do flexible working and are happy to do work from home, but there will be a bedding in period where you'll probably be in the office more than what you're not. So whether that is 4 or 5 days from home, especially at a management level. As managers, you know, it's important to get to know your team, to build that relationship with your team, to get to know the inner workings, also to know the workings of your organisation, the processes, the systems. And that's a lot harder to do at home and remotely than it is in person, especially the relationship building. And to be a good manager, you need to have that relationship. And as much as we're all adapting to screen at the moment, I don't think anything, and no one will ever admit that anything is better than actually face to face and being able to sit down with someone in the same room and have a conversation and, you know, get to know each other more.
Mm-hmm. And I think we touched on it in an earlier conversation as well. The mum question always comes up. Mums always love flexibility. And I remember you made a really great point about how you can negotiate on more than just pay.
Absolutely. I think time and hours is something that people really forget about when negotiating a new role. Everyone thinks it's all about the money. It's not. I mean, a lot of the time I say to clients is, well, this person wants this amount of money, you can't afford to pay that. So, but what could you give to them? Which sounds like you're giving a lot, but actually it's free to you. And a lot of the time, the answer to that is time. So whether you negotiate that you will still get paid, say, you've asked for 50, they can only do 45. Say, well, can I do 45 but do a 4-day week? You know, chances are you'll probably log on that 5th day, tap a few emails out, keep an eye on your phone, but you might not be actively working. Or it might be that you negotiate that you do a 9-day fortnight, you know, or you do 2 half days. So your 9-day fortnight could be that you finish at midday on a Friday. So you're still doing a 9-day fortnight, but it's a 0.5 off an end of a Friday or something. And it's not actually costing the company any money as well. I actually had a conversation with a client earlier today about that, and said, look, you know, someone with X amount of experience could probably do that job as well as someone with doing that 5 days a week with maybe a bit less experience. So again, that's something that you could maybe look at doing as well. So yeah, there's lots of ways around it. My COO actually is a trustee of an organisation called, what are they called? The Leadership Plus. I don't know whether you've heard of them.
Okay.
No?
No, I've not heard of them.
No, they're all about an organisation that deal with equality for women in the workplace. And she was saying they do really good podcasts, actually. And one of them is called Leaders with Babies, that might be of interest. Mm-hmm. And that's currently meant to be really good at like advising people on how to get confident and the different steps that they can take to kind of ask for, and, you know, how to go about sort of doing part-time hours. So that might have some really good tips on as well.
Yeah, so, yeah, great. I love a good podcast. I'm sure many of the watchers will enjoy that tip. So when it comes to interviewing, how is online interviewing going? Are companies just sort of, are they having to adapt at all? Is there anything that applicants might need to be aware of that's different as a result of that as well?
I think each company is kind of using a different software to interview. The 3 popular ones are Skype, Zoom, and Microsoft Teams. So obviously make sure that you're aware of all of those. Make sure obviously camera, sound, etc. Some have taken to it better than others. Some have kind of taken a little while to get the courage to actually go ahead and recruit and interview and onboard all remotely. I think a lot of organisations that have remote staff anyway, so a lot of charities that have international staff, membership bodies that have, you know, regional based staff are probably more used to it than maybe some of the more localised organisations, because obviously, you know, if you're going to interview someone in Africa, you're going to have to do it remotely. You can't really send a team over there. But it is common. It is happening more and more. I think it was happening more and more before COVID as well. I think a lot of people going into management positions now and at that hiring level now are within an age and within a demographic that understands technology and understand and are more comfortable with using these kinds of methods as well. And I think that's made a big, big difference. The other thing that's made a difference as well is people understanding that they've got to be more flexible as a hiring organisation. If you want that best fit candidate, you know, they're going to have busy periods as well where they can't be pulled away. And it's much easier for times for someone to log on to do an hour interview than it is for them to travel X amount of time, do the interview and then travel back to work. So you know, a lot of the time we say to clients, well, could you take 2 hours out of your day to travel over to them, to see them, to speak to them, to come back? Because they're basically doing your job in a different organisation. So how would you feel if I asked you to go for an interview? And you sort of ask them like that, and they're like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. So yeah, it's our busy period, it's their busy period. Yeah, we can do it remotely, that's fine. So it is more common. I think people are getting used to it a lot more. In terms of tips for candidates, I would say treat it like a normal interview in terms of, you know, how you dress, how you act, how you present yourself. Try and keep a plain background as well. Like, I know a lot of feedback has been from people, and a lot of the podcasts and webinars that we've gone on have been around, you know, sort of don't distract the interviewer. So people try and put like backgrounds of books and things like that, and actually it's way more distracting than just having a blank wall, or, you know, your bedroom or your study or your kitchen or whatever it is in the background. And yeah, I think just take your time, make sure that you're comfortable using the technology as well. So even if you know, Zoom a friend or a relative or something, and treat it as an interview situation, and make sure that you're comfortable being interviewed and ask those types of questions as well.
Yeah, and I think there's also a lot of tips for how to prepare for an interview. I know TPP have some on their site, and I'll share the link for that later. But I think that's a really great point about, now that everybody is used to using these online services, get a friend to help you out if you're feeling nervous. You know, give them some interview questions that you might be asked, and practice responding to them. And you know, the practice does make perfect. And especially if you haven't done an interview for a long time, or if you're changing sector, one of the biggest challenges is you might forget to use the right language in an interview. So the more practice you can get when doing a career change, the better, in my view.
Absolutely. And I think that's the other advantage of doing a CV and a cover letter, is that you can almost practice your interview through written form in the first instance. So hopefully by the time you get to interview, you've already got a good idea of the sort of things that you need to say, and how you need to say them as well.
Mm-hmm. So many career changes, they are changing career because maybe they've been working shifts, maybe they've been working in roles that are based at sea, not on land, or they've decided that they need to make the commitment to a career change, and they don't know where they're going to head to, but they've decided to leave where they are. So what that tends to do is present them with a gap in employment. And I always get the question, are companies and recruiters bothered about gaps? What should they do about gaps? And particularly if gaps are down to mental health issues or redundancy, what should they say to not sound, you know, bad or feel bad about what's happened to them?
Sure. So I think the best answer to all of that is honesty at the end of the day. If you've got a gap in your CV, be honest about why it's there. Obviously, you know, I know some things have stigma, and there's some things you don't want people to know straight away. So if it's something like an illness or a mental health reason or something along those lines, then obviously I'm not saying put on your CV that you're unemployed from X to X because of this, or you left a role because of this. You can leave it blank and say personal reasons, and then you can explain that at interview. But I think what people have to realise is, if they're not honest, or they try and hide something, that's going to look far worse than if you're just open about it. So the other thing is, you know, personal reasons, happy to disclose at interview, or details upon request, or something along those lines, I think is a good way to do it as well. Redundancies, I've never seen a stigma around being made redundant. I know some people have this fear that they put redundancy, people are going to think, oh, they got made redundant because there was an opportunity to get rid of them. But I mean, look at today's market. I mean, I know we don't know the full impact of redundancies at the moment, because I think furlough is hiding a lot of what's going to happen. And I think when that furlough is relaxed a little bit more, then we'll start to see what happens come July, I think, when it gets more relaxed. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we went through a recession not long ago. It's in people's living memory that redundancies happen. It probably happened to a lot of people, either them directly or a risk of, or people that they knew. So the stigma around redundancies, I think, in this day and age is a lot less than people imagine it to be. Like I say, I've never known someone not to get a role because of redundancy. So I wouldn't worry too much on that. I think this whole thing about putting the reason why you left roles on CVs doesn't really tie into the whole clear, concise, to the point, simple message that we all put out about CVs. So I don't think it's worth putting it on a CV if you were made redundant or you left due to career change or whatever it was. I know when I send CVs across, normally I don't bother including any of that unless a client specifically asks for it, which is rare, if ever. And if it's on an application form, then again, just be honest about it. With the mental health thing, I think we're moving in a much more positive way. Granted, there's still a lot of work to be done, and by no means have we got over this taboo of mental health yet. But I know, especially in our sector, there's a lot of a much better awareness around it. I think both in the not-for-profit as well as a lot of the corporate world now, there's a big HR agenda to really push awareness of mental health, understanding of mental health, and acceptance of mental health as well. We probably all suffer from mental health problems, even if we're undiagnosed or we don't really feel that we have any. We just do. And I think probably this lockdown has probably made us realise, a lot more of us as well, that there are, we all have days or moments. So yeah, again, I would say be honest, and it's much better to be honest about this than enter a role, have something happen, and people say, well, why didn't you tell us? We could have put support in, or we could have, done this. And I think I'm not saying that it's the easiest thing to come out and admit, because it's not. But yeah, if someone asks the question, be willing to have the answer, I would say, is probably the best thing. In terms of general gaps, some kind of sectors require you to have a 10-year work history, inclusive of all gaps. So education, in some of our roles, for instance, we have to put on there even if you've been travelling, I'm afraid, or anything that's been over 3 months, because it's to do with vulnerable children and those kinds of things. It has to be included. And also, if you've got a gap and you've been doing something in that time, tell them. If you've been volunteering, if you've done a course, if you've, I don't know, travelled, if you've done DIY, if you've looked after a parent or you've been a carer for somebody, then put it in there, because it shows them who you are as well. And it also shows, the skills that you would have developed by doing that particular thing that you did during that time.
Mm-hmm. I think as well, one of the things that so often I see clients forget is that, it's about more than just honesty on your CV. I think it's about actually owning your own journey and owning what you've been through. And if, so often if you are positive about that, other people will receive that positively. Yeah. And I think where there are still stigmas and, perhaps misinformed views around certain issues, I think by and large, you have to ask yourself, do you want to be working for a company that's going to take that attitude? And in particular, if it's an issue that's very close to your heart, that you perhaps maybe even still need some support on, or still have ongoing things with, it's definitely worth your employer knowing that and being able to help you. I mean, I've certainly had, I've had people on my team be in severely traumatic road accidents on the way to work. I've had people in my team with long-term mental health issues. And what I can say as a manager, from my perspective, and not all managers I think will take this view, but certainly for me, I was in a fortunate position of being able to work with an occupational health team who could then inform me about how, as a manager, I could best support those people and how I could best adapt their working hours, best adapt to actually understand what they're going through, and actually make that an integral part of the way that our team worked, without revealing anything to other members of the team. So there can be big positives from it. It's not always something to I think to shy away from, and authentically own your story. And you know, I have gaps in my CV, and interestingly, okay, it's only 6 months, I've never once been asked about it in interview. I think it was slightly touched on in interview once, and in that I just simply said the truth, which was I was doing a career change and I took some time out to decide my new direction and take some courses and figure some things out. And it was as simple as that. And I'd been so nervous about it. You know, so I think sometimes there's this idea that having a gap is a bigger problem than it really is. And don't let those thoughts run away with you, I'd say. No. So I'm just reading through the questions that we've had, because we've covered nearly everything now without me having to ask the specific questions, because the detail has been brilliant. I think the last thing to say is one thing that I've noticed with career changes is they have a tendency to reach out to recruiters, asking recruiters for ideas of what they could possibly do based on their CV. Have you ever had that experience as a recruiter?
Yeah, a lot of the time. And it's a really difficult one as well, because we can offer advice, but we can only offer so much. And also there's time is a massive thing. And I know it sounds awful to say, but at the end of the day, we also have our main role to do, which is to work with our clients to find the right people for those roles. And as much as we want to help and advise and, you know, really try our best to understand every CV, every person that gets in touch, it's not always possible for us to do that. There are only so many hours in the day at the end of the day, so it is really difficult. I think if you're going to approach a recruiter, make sure you do your research first, is my main advice. So have an idea at least at what sector you want to go in, or what kind of profession you want to go into, and then look at agencies that focus in that area. So for instance, there's no point you messaging myself if you are a finance person that wants to career change into being a teacher. Like, that's going to be, I won't be able to give you much advice on that, other than your best bet is to go and speak to somebody at a university that runs a teaching course, and they'll be able to tell you the best way to do it. I know that's a very generic, hypothetical kind of thing, but my main point is make sure that if you're going to contact a recruiter, that you've already done your research to make sure that that is the right person that is going to help you with your particular career change. I think secondly, before you even go to contact a recruiter, think about, like we said at the beginning, what is it that you want to do? Like, why are you career changing? You know, you must be doing it for a reason. So is it because you're not enjoying your role? Is it because you want to use your skill set elsewhere? Is it because you want to make a difference? Like, have some idea as to why you're approaching that particular recruiter as well, because it's really difficult for me to look at a CV and go, yeah, you'd fit in that job. Because 9 times out of 10 you won't fit in any of the roles I've got on at that moment with the CV that you would have sent me, which would have been tailored probably to the sector that you're currently working in. So I'm not going to be able to help off that. So start to look at the type of things you want to go into, start to tailor your CV. So it's all before even approaching a recruiter, you should be doing these types of things. Then when you get to the point where you've kind of right, okay, this is kind of what I want to do, this is how my CV sort of shows, this is what I've done before, this is the recruiter I want to speak to, send us your CV and send us specific questions. Don't just upload it onto a website, because you know it's unlikely that any recruiter, unless your skill set matches exactly the type of role that they're recruiting at the moment, will just get in touch with a generic CV. Again, we try to and we do try as much as we can, but again, it's a timing thing. But if you ask us questions, decent recruiters will come back to you with those answers, you know, and we will try and pencil in a call with you. I think that's the other thing as well, that you know, we get a lot of calls, and it's really difficult for us to do a lot over the phone with any kind of something to look at, like a CV, because it's all very well you telling me what you've done, but again, I've got no context to how that fits. So send me your CV, ask me your questions, and say you'd like to speak further. Can we arrange a time? And then we can go from there. I think that's kind of the best thing to do in terms of a step. And also be prepared that recruiters will be honest with you. So if there isn't a way that they can help you, they will turn around and they will be honest with you and say, look, I'm really sorry, but unfortunately the type of roles we recruit for won't look at that transfer of skills, won't look at your background, or they might turn around and go, it will be, we can keep your CV, we can keep you on file, but the likelihood of us having these types of roles is rare, or we get them once in a blue moon. So if they do come out, you will get the job alert, or you will get a phone call or email, but please don't expect them like 10 a week, or even, you know, twice a quarter or something along those lines. We will be honest with you, because there's no point us wasting your time on that side of things. And the other thing I would say is just remember that there's no guarantee. Like, even a recruiter, if we register you, we go through the whole process. We would love to place every person that we register. Trust me, it would be brilliant if we could. But I've not known any recruiter anywhere to place every single person they have spoke to, met, seen a CV of. It just doesn't happen. We can help, advise and support, but we can't guarantee a job placement. And we will do our best to, but unfortunately, even in the best economic climate with all the jobs going, we will probably not have a job for everyone at the end of the day, because the day that you're told yes, there'll be 3 others or 4 others that are told no, vice versa. On the day that you're told no, so are others, and only one person's got the yes. Unfortunately, as you said before, we're all told no a lot more than what we're told yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that it's easy to say when someone's come to me as a client, but what I do is I take them through a process of figuring out what are some options. I try and get them to a point where they've got 3 options in terms of where they could go with a career change based on their interests, their skills, their passions, why they're changing, a whole range of factors. And I think that recruiters, they're not trained in how to help you understand that as an individual.
No.
And I think what I always say to clients is I always suggest that they go and speak to people who are working in that industry, because they generally are willing to help a little bit more. Be clear that you're not looking for a job, that you're just looking for some advice because you're wanting to come into the sector, and ask them the questions first. Ask them, you know, what does someone need to have to come into this kind of role? Would you accept a career changer? Would you be looking for specific qualifications? Would you be looking for specific transferable skills? Would you be looking for certain qualities even? And really get a good feel for that. And it's usually once someone's got down to a situation where they're like, actually, it's option number 1, not 2 or 3. And we've started to put their CV together for that specific industry with that industry language and that industry intel, that I'll say to them, maybe have a word with a recruiter now and see what feedback you get, because the recruiter will know that industry. They'll tell you whether you stand a chance or not. And it's really only when you can present that recruiter with the best you've got for where you want to go that you can get a realistic view on whether that's possible or not. And I think one of the things that's really great about that is recruiters are very honest, and they will say you haven't got a cat's chance if that's the case, and they're often very good at suggesting other routes in. And one of the things with career changes, we so often think that we're going to go from, you know, this industry to that industry in one step. I can tell you from my own career change, from engineering to more training and development roles, that was my step in corporate. I had to take stepping stones. It was never, I'm going to jump straight into that role. I had to take a pay drop in order to get there. You know, and you have to work out as a career changer what you're going to be flexible on. Are you going to be flexible on the pay? Because you are going to be looking at roles where other people have a lot more experience or more relevant qualifications perhaps? Or are you going to look for those specialist roles where you are uniquely placed for them, and it may not be necessarily in a particular traditional role? You might be looking for a more specialist position that uses a unique blend of skills that you just happen to have. Certainly where I got to towards the end of my corporate work, I would say quite specialist roles, where my unique background really helped me get them, but it did mean the jobs were then fewer and far between when I did want to change.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's right. You know, once you get to recruiter level, you know, we know our sector inside out, but we know what a client wants to find us. And you know, you've hired, I'm sure a lot of your clients have hired before, possibly used agencies. Now, you've got to think of, as a hiring manager, when you used an agency, you were paying them for that service. So if you're paying that agency to find you those people, do you want them to find you the person that ticks all your boxes, can get into that job and hit the ground running? Or are you going to use an agency to find a transfer of skill person? Now, 9 times out of 10, your option is A. You're only going to pay us if we find you what you want. You're not looking for an unfinished product if you're wanting to pay for it, the same way that you wouldn't buy half a sofa or half a chair or whatever it may be. You want a finished product if that's what you're paying us to do as a service. And I think people, when they go looking for jobs, tend to forget that part of it, that actually, you know, the client, you know, we can help, we can advise, we can give you CV tips, interview tips, cover letter tips, but at the end of the day, we're being paid by that client to find this particular skill set. And if you've not got that particular skill set, you're probably not going to get selected for it. Otherwise, if they were looking for there or thereabouts, you would be more inclined to do your own direct recruitment, see what you get come through and go from there, really. So yeah, I know that's a really kind of brutal thing to say, but unfortunately it is the bottom line. And that's why, you know, not just ourselves, but so many agencies, again, that's why I say do your research on which agency is relevant to your field, have so many kind of resources on our websites these days, because we know we physically as individuals can't help everybody, but hopefully some of the tips and pointers and stuff like that we've got on there can at least give you an idea or a stepping stone to the right direction. And 100% on the bridging roles. Don't just think you're going to go from A to B. You'll probably go B, D, E, J, K to A. Like it just doesn't, you very rarely get it from there to there if you're changing sector. Salary, especially in our sector, I think that's something to be aware of. I think even if you are coming from a management role to look at another management role, you would find a massive salary, you know, sort of difference as well, because the corporate world is one thing, the not-for-profit world is somewhere down here somewhere. It's completely different ballpark in terms of salaries, even in the same level of roles, because obviously they're accountable a lot more. Their salaries are basically paid by their funders, by their donors. So where you're donating to a charity, you're also paying that person's wages as well that works in that charity. And you know, do you really want your money going to pay 100 grand salary, or do you want your money going to support the cause that you've actually donated that money towards? And again, that's something to remember and be aware of, that if you are looking to move to the not-for-profit sector, although salaries are getting better, they will never really be as on par as what the commercial world is.
I think as well, many charitable organisations, their salaries are actually capped and governed by the boards of trustees, or it might be written into the governance structure that people can't be paid over a certain amount. So as well, you might think about transferring in to a charitable role, but also you have to think about your future and what's your next step after that. And you know, if you're the kind of person that is looking to be continually growing your career, your salary, it's something to bear in mind about how you navigate that path.
Completely. And you know, that's why you find a lot of people that people like the idea of transferring into the charitable sector, and don't get me wrong, it's a great sector to work in. There are lots of benefits to working in that you wouldn't necessarily get in the corporate world. But you really do have to have a passion for the causes that you are working for, and probably more so, I would say. I've worked in corporate recruitment before, and there is probably less of an emphasis in cultural fit than what there is in the charity world. In the charity world, they want to know, like, why have you come from wherever you've come from to work for an animal charity? Why an international charity? And it's not about the role, it's about, well, because I like dogs, or I like cats, or I like humans, or whatever it may be. At the end of the day, that is just as important to them as the qualifications and the experience you have.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also say in the corporate world, that's starting to change as well. The behavioural and character fit of a person is becoming more and more important. And that's why being as authentic as you can in your CV and in your interview process is so important these days.
Yeah, exactly. Honesty, as we said before, is the best way forward. And you're only going to get found out at a later date at the end of the day. So be honest from the get-go.
So my last couple of questions for you now, Kristina, and then you can go and get a cup of tea, because I'm sure you need one like I do. My mouth's dry now, all this chatting. So do you think many career changers move into the charitable sector? And are there any specific backgrounds that lend themselves well to moving into this sector? It may not be something you know the answer to, I'm sure, but
there is no answer in terms of do many. Because I mean, you would have to look at every single person that got a job in the charity sector to know that answer. And, that's a big piece of research, and I don't think anyone's done it as yet. I would say it's a popular move, or it's a popular move to think about, is probably the best way. I think the kind of concerns that we've had before, the realism of the charity sector, I think is something that people don't realise. Like we said, the salaries is a massive thing. Like in the education world, we get a lot of teachers that come to us and say, I'm a teacher, I want to be in the charity sector, I don't like all the paperwork in schools. And sort of like, well, the problem is with that is that the salary, you're on a head teacher salary, and you are not going to get that. You're going to get something half, if you're lucky, of that. Secondly, you're not going to get the school holidays that you're getting at the moment. And thirdly, you still do a lot of paperwork. So actually the idea of it versus the reality of it is probably, a big off-putter to a lot of people. And I think that's something that, again, if you're really passionate about what you're going into, it won't be an issue to you. You just want to work for that particular cause, in which case, great, come on in. But yeah, I mean, it's really hard to kind of put on paper exactly the numbers. In terms of the roles, that again really varies. I mean, if you look at current market, digital skills, massive. Digital fundraising, digital comms, digital marketing. In my world, e-learning, e-assessment, remote invigilation, external quality assurance done remotely. If you know how to and have set up a remote invigilation platform, then you're probably, everyone wants you right now. If you're a paper-based assessment writer, probably not as much. But, again, that changes from time to time as well. So it's really difficult to say that there's an emphasis on certain type of roles. I think it's more on the skill set you can bring. In your more, I would say, corporate functions, so your HR, your facilities, your IT, again, there's not really, it is more about the cause and being aware of the salary differences as well on that side of things. Anything, if you're interested in going into it, then, go for it, I would say. If you've really got that passion for working for a not-for-profit in a particular field, then do it. But look at other ways around it, and don't, like we said before, necessarily think that you'll get a jump from one to the other. You may be lucky. There's always exceptions to rules, but you will be up against others that do have the sector experience, the same way that if someone wanted to move from a not-for-profit into your commercial world, they're going to be up against people that are commercial experience. And you as a hiring manager, which one would you take? You've always got to kind of flip it back on yourself. And then look at what someone what you would accept. So again, do the same for you. So we spoke about volunteering. Volunteering is massive, not just to show your enthusiasm, but once you're within an organisation, you can start to look at their internal vacancies. You can move from a volunteer role to a paid role. You could go from, say you're in a situation at the moment where you think, you know what, I'm quite happy to do some temp admin. You know, fine, do some temp admin, because you might then get, again, internal vacancies, temp to perm. You know, there's all kinds of things, all different ways around it as well. So be open to it, don't be put off by it, and look at, as we said before, not just job titles, but actually what the skills and experiences are of the jobs that are out there and do require, and what you can bring to those roles.
Yeah, all great points. I think as well, you know, just to kind of sum up some of the things that you were saying there, I always talk about putting yourself in a place where you're more likely to get opportunities that you may not have had otherwise. So, you know, it's very easy to look at certain people and go, oh, they were in the right place at the right time. But that person had decided to put themselves in a situation where they were connecting in with the field that they wanted to go into. And with career changes, one of the things that I notice is there's a tendency to hold back in terms of taking action because you're not 100% clear on where you want to go, or because you've not tested the water and had a chance to maybe do a role in that new sector. So I definitely take Kristina's advice about, you know, get involved in trusteeships, get involved in volunteering, dip your toe in the water and try it out, because it's a step towards knowing more clearly whether that's what you want or not. And also, there's a huge potential to find jobs in what's called the hidden jobs market. So this is where so many jobs never get advertised, because the cost of actually advertising and using recruiters is quite high to a company. Yeah. And particularly with SMEs, with the small to medium enterprises, many of them never go through a formal recruitment process. So many of them will post on LinkedIn. But so often, if there is a particular company that you want to work for, because everything they do just speaks to you in the way that you want to make a difference in the changes that you're making in your career and the direction you want to go in, don't be shy about approaching people and having conversations. Invite people for a cup of tea, offer to work for a week for free because you just want to get some experience. You never know what opportunities are out there unless you ask.
I would definitely agree with you on that point of approaching companies, especially your smaller ones. And smaller ones, I think even if you're aiming for a larger company, but you can find a smaller one that shares the same values and same direction, start your point off at the smaller one. Because if you turn around to a smaller organisation and you go, look, this is my skill set. If you need someone to do any kind of work around this for free for you for one day a week, an afternoon, a fortnight, whatever free time that you can give, it will be very rare that a small organisation that has a small team doesn't bite your hand off to take that opportunity, and then you end up doing more, or you might do bits and pieces for them, and it all starts to build. And I think LinkedIn is a massive tool for this as well, is that you don't have to choose these small organisations that are on your doorstep, or you think, oh, I want to do it because it's local, I don't want to have to travel far to do this work for them. You could Google them and then approach them on LinkedIn and do it all remotely. There's no reason in this day and age, with all the technology we've got, why you can't do that work remotely at the moment. I know one of my colleagues that's on furlough is doing some work for a charity, updating all of their policies, for all of their recruitment policies, just because she got bored. So she said, oh, I'll do that for you. I'll volunteer and do that. So, you know, there's no reason why you can't do the same. The charity will very rarely say no to someone, you know, asking to help them out. And again, with the jobs, and I think just to go back to LinkedIn as well, because I think we did skip this, when you're looking for roles, don't just think about updating your CV with the right language, update your LinkedIn. Because this day and age, more and more of us recruiters, we don't tend to use your CV databases like your Reeds or your Monsters. We tend to use LinkedIn. That is how I would probably search for 90% of my roles. how I found you, I think, wasn't it, Holly?
It was. That's how we met.
Exactly. So yeah, you know, it's LinkedIn. It's me searching those keywords, those key terminologies on LinkedIn. So if you can get your LinkedIn profile as up to date as your CV with those right phrases and key phrases, then that's as good, if not better. Join groups on LinkedIn of people with those skill sets. Join the not-for-profit groups as well. Contact people at not-for-profits. You can even search for people with similar job titles maybe to yourself, and then look at them within charities as well. So you could even connect with people that have your job title within a charity, and then ask them questions. Or it doesn't have to be a charity, obviously, but you know, and you can ask them questions like, look, I want your job one day, how would I go about getting it, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd definitely say to people, if you've not updated your LinkedIn in a long time, keywords are brilliant. I think I'd recently updated the keywords after learning a little bit about it when Kristina and I first met, because she was looking to fill a role and approached me about it. And I don't know whether you found me through that or through somebody, a connection who might have
keywords, and I knew what kind of organisation I wanted someone to come from, and I knew what background I did. So I did organisation and then booleaned the keywords that I wanted, and up you popped.
There we go. So it does work. There is proof here. And I would say as well, make sure that people know that you're actively looking for a job on LinkedIn, and that your friends, the ones, if you're in a role and you don't maybe want all your colleagues to know that you're looking for a job actively, but maybe your friendships outside of work, maybe your close colleagues in work, you just never know who's going to have a conversation with who. Particularly, I would say, if you have salespeople in your organisation that you know well, let them know, because they're often speaking with lots and lots of companies, and they might just happen to meet someone with the right opportunity for you as well.
And at networking events as well. Don't be afraid to introduce yourself, or make it obvious that you're really interested in that company or that type of role. And say, oh, you know, on the quiet, the number of events I go to and people have a client conversation with me, and as soon as their colleague walks off, be like, just between you and me. So, you know, it happens all the time, and it is worth doing. And also on LinkedIn, there is now a button that you can press that is open to new opportunities. And I know a lot of people are scared about that in case the wrong people see it, but the algorithm means that if you have it clicked, people that work for your company or any subsidiaries can't see that you've raised your hand to new opportunities as well. So as a recruiter, we love that tool.
Amazing. Such good intel there. So Kristina, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for all the brilliant advice as well. I think the one thing that you've really got across really well is the role of a recruiter, and where they can help and where they can't. And I think, if nothing else, that will be super useful to anybody that's looking to do a career change, is to know when is the right time and how to approach a recruiter. So thank you very much. Any final thoughts before we go, or anything you think we've missed?
No, I think we've covered a lot, actually. Yeah, so nothing that I can think of, but obviously if you guys have any questions, then feel free to bob them over to me. I'll do my best to help. Obviously, as you said, we've got links to our website with all the blogs and resources on there. We also advertise volunteer roles on there as well, so again, another place to look as well for if they want to do volunteering. Yeah, and that's it, I think, at the moment.
All right, well, I'll share those links as well with everybody when you send them over. So I'll just say goodbye. Have a great evening, rest of the day, whatever time you're watching this at. And we look forward to more conversations with more interesting people like Kristina over the next few months. Take care. Bye.